illegal and aggressive sanctions imposed on Russia because they disrupt the whole logistic chains, including transport and financial elements, and basically these chains are needed in order to ensure the smooth delivery of Russian grain.
На встрече 22 июля в Стамбуле был подписан меморандум между Российской Федерацией и ООН, и в этом документе генеральный секретарь Антонио Гутерреш взял на себя обязательство добиться отмены вот тех ограничений, о которых я сейчас сказал. Это обязательство зафиксировано на бумаге. Надеюсь, что у генерального секретаря Гутерреша получится выполнить то, под чем он подписался.
On the 22nd of July this year in Istanbul, a memorandum was signed between Russia and the United Nations. And according to this memorandum, the UN Secretary General has committed himself to do his best in order to stop those restrictions, to lift those restrictions, and hopefully he will be able to succeed.
Вот видите, вы задали короткий вопрос, а я на него отвечаю достаточно долго. Все это потому, что западная пропаганда вбрасывает в общественное сознание именно такие вот лозунги. Россия виновата за энергетический кризис, за продовольственный кризис, и потом в мозгах обывателя это вот крутится, ему вбивают, и в это начинают люди верить. А если кто-то хочет разобраться поподробнее, вот я постарался кое-какие факты вам привести, чтобы вы обратили на них внимание. Есть немало других возможностей, других публикаций, где излагается правда о причинах нынешнего положения в мировой экономике.
You see, you asked me a very short question, but I gave you rather a long answer. The reason for this is that our Western partner, our Western propaganda expert keep injecting various slogans like it is Russia to blame for the current food crisis. And unfortunately, these slogans stay in the brain, in the minds of simple people. But if you are willing to know better, I try to give you some facts. And there are many other publications where you can find the real truth about the current situation.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency, for the response to that question. I would like now to invite Mr. Patrick Onen of the Associated Press to raise his question.
Thank you, your Foreign Minister. My question is, you've ably elaborated about the current crisis that most African countries are facing. Are we going to see a direct intervention from Russia regarding this crisis in provision of maybe wheat? And then the other one is, you're traveling in Africa. There's tension between Egypt and Ethiopia right now about the Renaissance Dam. Are you going to have this in your agenda? Thank you.
Вот видите, что касается первого вопроса, как я и сказал, у вас в голове есть слоган, такой лозунг, почему вы не решаете продовольственный кризис. А я постарался в ответе на первый вопрос показать, что жизнь, она всегда гораздо сложнее, чем лозунги, даже исходящие из Associated Press.
Well, you see, speaking about giving answer to your first question, I see clearly that you have those slogans in your mind about Russia being blamed for everything, and you are asking why Russia does not intervene in order to find a solution to this problem. But I try to show you that life is much more complicated than all those slogans even given by Associated Press.
Вот, а что касается отношений между Египтом, Эфиопией, касательно плотины возрождения, которую эфиопская сторона возводит на Голубом Ниле, мы выступаем за то, чтобы вопрос был решен между самими напрямую заинтересованными сторонами, как положено в любой ситуации.
As for the relations between Egypt and Ethiopia and about the construction of the dig on the Blue Nile by Ethiopians, once again, we believe that it is up to the stakeholders, namely to the two parties, to find a solution directly in line, which is usually the case for these kind of affairs.
есть нормы международного права, есть Хартумская декларация 2015 года, которую стороны подписали. Это хорошие ориентиры для того, чтобы они между собой находили обоюдоприемлемые решения. Мы такой процесс поддерживаем.
We have the international law, we have the 2015 Khartoum Declaration, which could serve as a positive guidelines for the parties to find a solution, and which will be mutually acceptable, and we totally support such approach.
Мы не навязываем свое посредничество. Несколько лет назад Соединенные Штаты назначили какого-то специального представителя, который лихо взялся за эту работу, а потом опустил руки и, в общем-то, ушел в тень. Об этом сейчас никто и не вспоминает.
We do not impose anything. We do not impose mediation services from our part. A few years ago, the U.S. Appointed their special representative, who came and was very eager to find a solution, but then suddenly he left and is somewhere in the shadow.
Я убежден, что в этой ситуации, как и в отношении других вопросов, которые возникают на африканском континенте, оптимальным является посредничество, содействие, сопровождение переговоров по линии Африканского союза и соответствующих субрегиональных африканских организаций.
It is my conviction that here, as well as in other affairs on the African continent, the best option would be the mediation follow-up coming from the African Union and other sub-regional organizations.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
I can help the question about, you see, the minister explained to me in the sanctions by the West against Russia, they don't mention that they have sanctioned wheat or fertilizers. It's not mentioned, it's not part of the list. But he explained to me the West has stopped Russian ships from calling on a number of ports. So how will the fertilizers go or the wheat go if the ship don't move? Then there is the issue of the banks, that banks are not allowed to do business with Russia. So if you don't pay for the wheat you have bought or the fertilizer, then how do you, I think there was the third one, there was the banks and the ship, and I think the insurance also, insurance companies put the insurance charge very high if you carry. So although there are no direct sanctions on the wheat and on the fertilizers, by sanctioning the ships, and that's why in their agreement in Istanbul with the Secretary General of the UN, he's supposed to handle those. That's what he briefed me.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for that additional explanation. May I now take this opportunity to ask Denis Bolotsky of Sputnik News to ask his question.
Здравствуйте. У меня вопрос к министру Лаврову. Сергей Викторович, сейчас идет активная работа над новой концепцией внешней политики Российской Федерации. Насколько изменится роль и степень важности африканских стран для России в новой редакции этого документа? Спасибо.
I have a question addressed to the Minister Lavrov. Currently, there are preparation works for the new policy, new Russia's international policy. How will the role of African states change in this new edition of the policy?
Я могу смело сказать, что роль африканского континента в концепции нашей внешней политики будет повышена, причем существенно повышена.
I can tell you, I can promise you that the role of the African continent in the new edition of the policy will be enhanced.
Это произошло бы независимо от того, что происходит на западном направлении, а западное направление, как вы знаете, сейчас само себя отменяет.
It would have happened regardless of the situation on the West, and as you see currently, our international policy with the West is excluding itself.
Так что и в силу наших принципиальных, долгосрочных, неконъюнктурных интересов значение Африки будет возрастать. Ну и в силу того, что сейчас делает Запад, по отношению к нашей стране, это объективно будет увеличивать долю африканского направления в нашей работе.
We have our principle, our long-term relations, which do not depend on the current global situation, and so apparently the African element will grow, but given the current situation and the current activities undertaken by the West, objectively the role of African continent will grow.
Мы уже приступили к работе по подготовке второго саммита Россия-Африка. Он намечен на следующий год. И созданы соответствующие рабочие группы, которые в контакте, в координации с африканскими друзьями, я убежден, подготовят солидный пакет документов, который будет содержать практически значимые договоренности.
We are currently preparing for the second edition of the Russia-Africa Summit, which will be held next year. And there are working groups which are established, and I'm pretty sure that in concert with our African friends, they are going to prepare a solid packet of documents to be applied in practice.
Пойду посижу.
I'm going to have a seat now.
Thank you once again, Your Excellency. May I now ask Bepti Amam Kiror of New Vision to ask your question.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The war in Ukraine has taken a toll on almost all economies in the world, and Africa has been hard hit. How do you suggest, or what do you think can be done to resolve the Russia-Ukraine problem? Thank you.
I think you dropped something.
Oh, it's okay. Thank you.
Ну, что касается экономической стороны дела, вы упомянули опять, что Африка страдает из-за России, получается. Я уже дважды пытался на этот вопрос ответить. Если у задающих вопросы журналистов есть задание спросить, почему Россия виновата и зачем Россия это делает, ну, я еще раз могу только вас адресовать к ответу на первый вопрос.
Well, as for the economic dimension, you said that Africa had been hard hit, and again that it is Russia to blame for it. I think that actually I already gave the answer even twice to that question, but if our journalists are tasked, I'm mandated to ask the question why Russia has done that, I think I can address you only to the first answer that I gave.
Что касается ситуации на земле и перспективы ее развития, мы тоже об этом сегодня подробно с господином президентом говорили. Мы никогда не отказывались от переговоров, потому что всем хорошо известно, любые боевые действия заканчиваются за переговорным столом.
As for the situation on the ground, we have also thoroughly discussed this issue with Mr. President today. And I shall say that we never rejected talks, and everyone knows that all hostilities should end up with the negotiations.
И когда на ранней стадии нашей военной операции украинская сторона предложила переговоры, мы согласились. Состоялось несколько раундов, которые привели к очень интересному этапу 29 марта в Стамбуле, когда украинская сторона предложила вариант договора, который мы поддержали. И об этом уведомили наших киевских коллег. Но с тех пор никакого ответа от них мы не получили. Хотя, подчеркну еще раз, мы согласились с их подходом, по сути дела. Нам известно, что такие наши коллеги, как Соединенные Штаты, Великобритания, ряд европейских стран, запретили украинцам договариваться с нами на той основе, о которой вот я упомянул.
At the early stage of this operation, Ukrainian offered us to start the talks, and we accepted. There were a few rounds of those talks, and on the 29th of March in Istanbul, the Ukrainian side came up with the draft agreement, which we supported. But later on, there were no further answer from Ukrainians. And it is really important because we accepted that, and we accepted to work on the Ukrainian proposal, the Ukrainian approach, but later on the United States, the United Kingdom and some European countries simply prohibited Ukraine to negotiate with us.
Вот вы послушайте просто, почитайте не то, что вы видите в лозунгах на экранах или в соцсетях, а что произносят западные политики. А произносят они следующее. В этом конфликте Украина должна победить на поле боя. Украина должна достичь военной победы. Никаких переговоров с Россией, пока Украина не победит Россию. Почитайте, это же не я придумал.
Basically, you can read not only the slogans and the media, what they say, but you can listen to what European politicians say. And they say that Ukraine must have a military victory on the ground. They say that no talks are possible until the Ukraine has won.
Я вот несколько дней назад в интервью произнес фразу, что у России нет предубеждения против переговоров с Украиной.
A few days ago in an interview I said that Russia has no presumptions against talks with Ukraine.
Немедленно, несколько часов даже прошло всего, как в Госдепартаменте официальный представитель заявил, что США считают сейчас не время для Украины вести переговоры с Россией.
And almost immediately, a few hours later, the State Department in the US announced that they believe it is not a good time to negotiate with Russia.
Делайте выводы, у американских коллег поспрашивайте, в чем там причина.
Well, it's up to you to make your conclusions. You can ask your American partners to see what the reason is.
Ну и еще одна цитата. Президент Путин на прошлой неделе выступал, и он произнес такую фразу, что мы не отказываемся от переговоров, но те, кто отказываются, должны понимать, что чем дальше, тем труднее будет с нами договариваться.
And one more quotation, if I may. Last week, Mr. Putin, the President Putin, gave a speech, and he said, we do not reject talks, but those who do should know that further they go, the more difficult it will be to negotiate.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. May I now ask Samuel Senono of Uganda Broadcasting Corporation to ask his question?
Right. Thank you. Well, there are reports that some countries outside Europe continue buying Russian oil despite the sanctions. If this is true, why can't Russia sell oil to Russia? Because fuel prices are... No, why can't Russia sell oil to Africa, where fuel prices are increasing day by day?
Знаете, тоже очень странный вопрос. Ну, во-первых, вы сказали, что сообщается, будто Россия продает нефть отдельным странам, несмотря на санкции. То есть в вашем вопросе содержится утверждение, что вот есть санкции, и все должны им следовать, если я правильно понимаю то, что вы сказали.
There is another weird question, you know. You said they say that Russia is still selling oil to individual European states despite the imposed sanctions. So basically, in your question, there is an affirmation that there are sanctions and everyone has to obey.
Мы продаем нефть любой стране, которая в этом заинтересована. И если та или иная страна того хочет, никаких препятствий для этого нет. Будь это Индия, будь это Китай, будь это любая африканская страна.
We sell oil to all the interested countries, and if there is a state which is interested, which is willing to buy oil, whether it is India or an African state, there are no obstacles for this.
И не только продаем нефть, но и помогаем развивать свою собственную отрасль по переработке углеводородов, производству нефтепродуктов, использованию газа в промышленности.
Not only we sell oil, but we also provide assistance in developing its own infrastructure in terms of refineries and oil products.
И такие вот дискуссии у нас в том числе намечены, и они будут углубляться с нашими друзьями из Уганды.
So we also are committed to having such discussion with our Ugandan friends on this topic.
Finally, Your Excellencies, let me take this opportunity to invite Maria Finoshina of RT for Russia to ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie Finoshina, RT International. I can see, Mr. President, that no one is asking you questions, so I think it's unfair. So my question is for you. First, you've talked a lot about friendship between Uganda and Russia. What are the aims of further cooperation between the two countries. And also you've mentioned that back in the Cold War times, they ask you a question whether you are a pro-West or pro-East, and we know your answer. But unfortunately, today, this question is also often asked, as we see the West is basically trying to put pressure on all the countries, trying to work together with Moscow and actually openly sanctioning Russia's partners. As a country openly declaring that Moscow is a friend, does Uganda feel this pressure? And ahead of Mr. Lavrov's visit here, did anyone maybe approach you asking, for example, not to take pictures with Mr. Minister like we've seen in Egypt, for example? Thank you so much.
Nobody can tell me such a question because they know my position. They know our position. Maybe they tell others, but not us. So people can't be so stupid as to ask me that don't take a picture with so and so. Don't. That's a joke. What are the interests are clear. The strategy of the African freedom movement, of which we are part, is because the human race for the last 4.5 million years, when human beings have been here, has had two oppressions. Oppression by nature, floods, hunger, disease, drought, and oppression by man. When certain men oppress other people. You want to translate? You understand. So therefore, if you look at our language, in the resistance movement and the African freedom fighting movement, we talk of progressive forces versus reactionary forces. Progressive forces are those forces which improve the condition of man, irrespective of their social systems. So that's why, if we see China coming up, it is a communist country. We are not communists ourselves here, but they have controlled hunger in China, they have controlled disease, they have produced more jobs, they have created more electricity. So we are happy with them, we welcome them. Then you look at a country like Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a monarchy. I'm not a monarchist, I'm a Republican. But they are improving situation in their country. People have got more food, better houses, so we welcome that. Then if you have got another group who may have a different social system, different political system, but they are improving the condition of man, we welcome it. Because they are handling the aspect of oppression of man by nature. They are mitigating the suffering of man at the hands of nature, controlling floods, controlling disease, and so on. Then on the issue of oppression of man by man, that one will be handled according to each country. Each people know how to resist. When the people organized a revolution in Iran against the Shah, nobody organized it. It was the people themselves who did it. So therefore, if we stick to the UN Charter of cooperation among countries, irrespective of their different social systems, I think things will be much better for the world. When there is progress in China, when China was getting out of poverty, the price of steel went up. Why? Because they needed more steel in China, and the price went up. It went from $200 to $900. So we benefited here in Uganda from progress in China. The price of cement went up. The price of copper, because they needed more copper wires for more electricity in China. This is the correct understanding of progress for the human race, the whole human race, to come up. So our interest with Russia is that when there is progress and stability in Russia, we also benefit, because they buy some things from us, we buy things from them. And you hear we are going to cooperate in specific ways also, in space, in space and atomic energy, and so on. This is what we are looking for. Win-win. Win-win for everybody in the world. And it's possible. It's possible. So this idea of rivalry is really something we are going to have to discuss with our... It's not part of our liberation movement strategy. No. The African liberation movement. Otherwise, we should be quarreling with those who colonized, who took slaves from here. We should be having quarrels with them. Why did you take slaves? Why did you colonize us? We should be having enmity. But we forgot about that, and we are moving forward. Why? Because we want win-win cooperation in the world. Thank you. I think we can go on. What's the next? Your
Excellencies, that brings the end to this segment of His Excellency's visit. I think we can proceed to the next one, cham-cham.
Or eating. What do they call eating in Russian? What do they call it? What do you call eating? Eda. Eda, we go for Eda now.